Today on EcoXplorers, join Aaron and the crew of the Florida Keys Dive Center on the dive of the Duane. Discover the ship's rich history and the diversity of life that has made the Duane their home.
Oh, hello, welcome to EcoXplorers. I'm Aaron. Today we're getting ready to head down to Key Largo to dive the Coast Guard cutter Duane. The Duane is a 327-foot Coast Guard cutter that was intentionally sunk to be an artificial reef. I'm going to get the rest of the gear, go ahead and get in the van, and we'll load up and head on down. The 327-foot Coast Guard cutter Duane sits in about 130 feet of water. I speculate our average depth is probably going to be about 95 feet, so we want to make sure all our gear's in order and everything's well established. Because the Duane sits close to the Gulf Stream, there's going to be really high current, but that should make our visibility well over 100 feet. Well, it looks like gear's all ready. Hopefully we should be in order. Go ahead and pack everything up here. Let's head on down. Here we are at the Florida Keys Dive Center. Let's go inside and talk with Jason.
How you doing this morning?
Hi, Jason, I'm Aaron with EcoXplorers.
Aaron, pleasure to meet you. Good to have you.
Why don't we go outside and talk about the dive that we're going to have today?
Certainly. Get you out there, show you the boat, show you the facility.
What can you tell us about the Duane?
Duane happens to be one of my personal favorites, actually my favorite wreck dive down here. 327 feet long, sits upright, approximately 125 feet of water to the sand. Main deck's about 100 feet, superstructure comes up to 80 feet. And there's not much I guarantee on dives, but one thing I will guarantee is tons of Barracuda. There's a resident moray eel that hangs out. The ship was sank as part of an artificial reef project back in 1987, I believe it was, so it's got a lot of growth. Sits just outside the main reef line, so sometimes there's some current, but along with that current brings in a lot of nutrients, therefore it just abundance of marine life. Definitely schooling snappers, you're going to have big Barracuda, and when I say big, it's not uncommon to have Barracuda the size of 4 feet or bigger. Occasionally we'll see nurse sharks. There's usually a moray eel hanging out on the deck. Sometimes there's groupers. Keep your eyes out for a turtle. There's usually one that likes to hang around the crow's nest. But again, you never know what you're going to see. It sits out there. I've had a squadron of eagle rays come through at different times, schooling Atlantic spadefish, your typical tropicals, your bigger parrotfish. Occasionally we'll get lobsters. Take your time and look for some of the small stuff. You're going to see little yellow arrow crabs. There's a couple Peterson cleaning shrimp where there's some corkscrew anemones along the edges of the wreck on the top deck. Slipper lobster occasionally. And again, the moray eels, so all sorts of stuff. All the cool stuff is 100 feet or shallower. There's big open hatches and doorways that you can clearly see through one side to the other, so there's swim-throughs. Also, with it being upright, if there is any current, you can usually get on one side of the wreck or the other and get in the lee of the current so that you're not struggling or having to exert too much energy.
Say someone's never dove before and they decide they want to dive the Duane. What would they actually need to do?
Well, here at Florida Keys Dive Center, and what you'll find most common throughout the Upper Keys, the policy is if you haven't been diving in 1 year, we have you go with a guide. My staff is all instructors, so that's easy for us to provide. If it's been more than a couple of years that you've been diving, then we have you do a refresher course. But what we look for is an advanced certification or 2 deep dives within the last 6 months to be able to go out and do the Duane on your own.
Okay. And you'd be able to certify anyone who hadn't dove?
Yep, that's not a problem. We do that on a quite frequent basis. We have people walk in the mornings, they're looking for a reef trip. We happen to have a wreck trip going. We'll get one of our instructors with them, and that usually leads to an advanced certification.
I want to thank Jason for all the valuable information he's provided us about the Duane. For more information about the Florida Keys Dive Center, visit EcoXplorers.tv. When we come back, we'll board the boat and head on out to the wreck.
EcoXplorers is brought to you by Caribbean Dive Vacations. Everywhere to dive in the Caribbean. Call today, 888-462-8875. Ocean Reef, connecting divers. Visit oceanreefgroup.com for all of your dive communication needs. Mach 1 Audio, the publisher of Scuba and Scuba Vacation DVDs. Available at EcoXplorers.tv.
Our transportation to the wreck today is going to be aboard a 46-foot Newton, specially designed for scuba diving. This boat carries 36 people, but today we're only going to be diving with 24 on board. Since the weather is sunny, with only light winds, we expect minimal wave action. I checked before we left to come to Key Largo. However, before we leave the dock, we should make one last check to ensure we have all our gear. I'll load the scuba gear toward the back of the boat. This should allow us to be one of the first divers into the water. We should get our gear set up before leaving the dock. This is much easier than trying to set it up at sea. I got your set ready. Check our air, see what we got. We should double check our air. Since we are using low pressure steel tanks provided by Adventure Dive Center, we should have about 2,600 PSI. 3,000 pounds. Exactly where we should be at. Using these tanks allows us to use less weight, provides us with more air, and should give us a greater margin of safety. Check your gear, see what you're at. It looks as if everyone is really excited about today's dive, with maybe a little apprehension of seasickness. Oh, you got a little less, 28. Gonna have to breathe lighter.
Here is doing a full briefing underway.
Before we leave the dock, the captain is going to give us a dive briefing. When he calls out our name, we need to make sure he knows we're here. We wouldn't want to get left out at sea.
All right, let's find out who you guys are. So everybody please attention on this one. Aaron. Yes. Thomas.
Yes.
I don't want you raising your hand. Sam.
Once we clear the buoys, we should be well on our way, and according to the captain, we should be traveling about 20 knots. Now that we're at the dive location, let's go talk with the captain to find out what to expect. I'm here talking with Captain Greg of the Big Dipper. He's going to give us a little bit of information about what to expect on the dive for the Duane.
Dive in a Duane, normally what I would have is I would have some expectation of seeing current. It is usually quite blue. It's really a nice, easy dive because of the upright ship and its formation. It lends itself for people who are first diving as far as a wreck dive experience. It's really a good place to be.
Has anyone ever died diving the Duane?
Yes. I haven't had that experience. The only thing is I had one near death on there, just so that you understand. But we were able to revive the young lady, and when I talked to her later, she had no idea, had no recollection of why, and the next thing she remembered was us over the top of her reviving. She remembers being on the bottom and then on the surface being revived, and that was it. There are days where maybe if I got out to the site, that it'd probably be maybe in the realm of 5%, maybe 10% of the time. It might be a little bit more than what the people were ready for. So sometimes we have to call that. So I look at the different people who are on, conditions, and also qualifications. That really goes in, plays heavy on my decisions.
We're out in the John Pennekamp State Park, out in the open ocean, overlooking the reefs down below. We just got done talking with Captain Greg, who gave us a lot of valuable information about the dive we're about to dive today. I want to thank him. Let's get our gear on and let's go dive. Wow, from this view, this looks like it's going to be a wonderful dive. For more information about the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, visit EcoXplorers.tv. When we come back, we'll learn more about the Duane service record. In service for almost 50 years and through 2 wars, the Duane really has an impressive service record. Here's more about the Duane.
The William J. Duane is a Treasury-class Coast Guard cutter, which were all named for former secretaries of the Treasury Department. She was named for William John Duane, who served as the 3rd Secretary of the Treasury to serve under President Andrew Jackson, and the 3rd cutter to bear that name. The Treasury-class cutters were based on the Erie-class Navy gunboats. Built by the Philadelphia Navy Yard for a total cost of $2.5 million, William J. Duane had a length of 327 feet and a beam of 41 feet. She was powered by 2 Westinghouse turbines that drove 2 9-foot, 3-bladed propellers. She had an average cruising speed of 11 knots with a maximum speed of 20.5 knots and was able to travel 8,000 nautical miles before needing refueling. The William J. Duane entered commissioned service on August 1, 1936, where her first mission was to supply construction material to aid in the building of an emergency airfield in support of aviatrix Amelia Earhart's world flight. In mid-1937, the William J. Duane name was shortened to merely Duane. For the next 2 years, she conducted Bering Sea patrols. In 1939, the Duane returned to the Atlantic where she conducted weather patrols before sailing to South Boston for rearmament for the start of World War II. The Duane was assigned to permanent duty with the Navy in 1941 and was designated a WAGC-33, a Coast Guard command flagship. She would serve as an escort vehicle for merchant ship convoys for the next 4 years of the war. On April 17, 1943, the Duane located and opened fire on a 740-ton German U-175 U-boat, hitting center of the submarine's conning tower. 25 minutes later, the submarine sank stern first. The Duane picked up 20 German enlisted and 2 officers, only to discover later that an additional unknown U-boat picked up remaining survivors. In July 1945, the Duane underwent a reconversion back to her peacetime configuration, including the removal of the majority of her armament. For most of the next 20 years, the Duane and her sisters alternated duty between weather stations. In 1965, the Coast Guard adopted its own designation system. Large cutters were grouped into one class, referred to as Coast Guard High Endurance Cutters, or WHEC. In December 1967, the Duane's new assignment was off the coast of Vietnam, where she served as the flagship. The primary mission was the interdiction of supplies and arms being smuggled to the Viet Cong and providing support to ground forces by naval gunfire. Her crew boarded 32 vessels and inspected 388 steel-hulled and 5,211 wooden-hulled vessels. Her medical team treated over 300 native people from local fishing villages. Once back in the United States, Duane returned to ocean station duty.
In May 1971, the Duane provided support for an at-sea conference between an American ambassador, representatives of the local fishing industries, and the commander of a Soviet Georges Banks fishing fleet to settle disputes between U.S. and Soviet fishermen. She changed home ports to Portland, Maine in August 1972, where she served until her decommissioning. The Duane returned to ocean station duty, but this task was rapidly becoming obsolete. The Duane was always known as the Queen of the Fleet. The Duane began her war on drugs in May 1978. The remainder of her service, she was responsible for seizing over 200 tons of marijuana and the arrest of over 75 smugglers. In 1980, the Duane became the flagship and command center during the Cuban exodus. In 1982, with the last of her sister Treasury-class cutters decommissioned, the Duane became the oldest cutter on active duty. Following a service tradition, the Duane's hull numbers were painted in gold, signifying her new and honored status in the fleet. She finished her Coast Guard career carrying out what the Coast Guard does best, saving lives. The Duane's age was showing, replacement parts were non-existent. The Coast Guard decided that it was no longer cost-effective to put money into the 49-year-old cutter, and so ordered her to be decommissioned. At that time, she was the oldest U.S. warship on the active rolls, truly the Queen of the Fleet. She was sunk as an artificial reef along with her sister cutter Bib off Key Largo on November 27, 1987.
Wow, the Duane really does have an impressive history. For more information about the Duane, visit EcoXplorers.tv. When we come back, we'll explore some of the biodiversity now living aboard the Duane. From just a little over 20 years below the sea, the Duane has acquired a huge variety of marine life. Sponges and soft corals cover the boat from bow to stern. 6 monitoring stations have been organized aboard her. A total of 33 hard corals and 14 soft corals have been identified. Fish, which once lived further inshore, have taken post aboard her. Large pelagic fish are also frequently encountered. Would you look at this barracuda? He seems to be interested in what we are doing. Not to worry though, these fish are opportunistic feeders waiting to ambush on unsuspecting prey. Look off into the distance. There must be 20 to 30 swimming out there off the side of the wreck. Let's swim further down toward the bow. See those Atlantic spadefish schooling beneath the lifeboat davit? They're probably trying to stay clear of that large barracuda we just passed. The colors of these sponges are amazing. Because of our depth, colors fade. However, because we have lights, we can see the brilliant colors vividly. Well, my air is getting low. Let's take a look at the conning tower and begin heading back to the line to ascend. I really like these fish. The Duane is an example of a successful artificial reef. Barracuda, angelfish, jacks and grunts, an occasional sea turtle and shark are just a few examples of marine creatures commonly seen at this site. you for joining us. It was great diving the Duane with you today. I'd like to thank Adventure Dive Center in Albany, Georgia for providing us additional equipment, and the Florida Keys Dive Center for transportation to or from the wreck and their wealth of information. Join us next time where we begin a new adventure on EcoXplorers. For more information on EcoXplorers, visit EcoXplorers.tv.
EcoXplorers is brought to you by Caribbean Dive Vacations. Everywhere to dive in the Caribbean. Call today, 888-462-8875. Ocean Reef, connecting divers. Visit oceanreefgroup.com for all of your dive communication needs. Mach 1 Audio, the publisher of Scuba and Scuba Vacation DVDs. Available at EcoXplorers.tv.